Well, ever since that really hard freeze, I keep getting lots of emails and messages asking me what plants I could recommend that won't freeze. I've had people messaging me and emailing me about plants that they have found successful, so I'm adding these. So since it's such a hot topic right now, I wanted to go through my yard and show you guys the things that survived the freeze and the things that didn't. And most of them are native, some of them aren't, but probably 98% of them are native. So like in this shot, we have a beautiful eastern redbud on the right, and on the left is a coral honeysuckle on that trellis. Those two guys did great. So if you're interested in finding out some natives that will do well and survive freezing temperatures, stay tuned. And I'll take you around my green space and show you what happened to some of my plants, good or bad. The tree in the center of the screen is a red maple. This is another tree that survived the freeze really well. This is next to the lake, so it gets constant moisture, so it's a perfect spot for it, and it's grown so much and so beautifully. I'm really proud of it because when I moved in, it was probably maybe 6 feet tall. So it's in the perfect spot for a red maple. I like them because I can find volunteers and they transplant really well, so I get lots of free trees, which, as you know, I like free trees. This next tree is called a groundsel tree, and this is actually an understory tree, but it survived the freeze. And when this goes to seed, the seeds have these little fuzzy pappus on them, which is what is carried away by the wind. So the top of this tree, actually the whole outer part of the tree, will be covered in this beautiful white fuzzy bloom. And I think it's very attractive and I like it. Some people don't like it because it'll reseed in different places, but it's easy enough to remove. This is a cross vine that's a semi-evergreen native that can get to a mature length of 50 feet. I like to plant these on a trellis or a fence because if I grow them on a tree, the vine will climb 50 feet up into the canopy and I won't be able to watch the pollinators on the flowers because they'll be too high up in the tree canopy. So it does really well on a fence. It'll spread out very nicely horizontally on a fence. These are usually pretty easy to find at local big box stores. This one I purchased at Lowe's. They seem to usually only sell them when they have blooms because that's when they look the best and when people purchase them the most. I check every time I'm in there for natives, and you'd really be surprised at the amount that they carry if you have the time to check often. You'll be surprised at how many natives they actually do have. So here you can see the newly opened flowers. Each one has a hole at the base of it, and that's because bumblebees are in search of nectar and their tongues are too short for the depth that this flower has. So hummingbirds and large sulfur butterflies have long tongues and they can usually reach the nectar without any trouble, but bumblebees need to cut a hole in the base of it so that they can drink the nectar. Occasionally they'll be able to climb into the flower, but I think that leaves them open to predation, so they prefer to chew a hole at the base and access the nectar. This one did really well in the freeze. Here's another deciduous one that didn't get damaged by the freeze because it wasn't producing any foliage. This is my beautyberry, or one of them. and it's starting now just to put out fresh new leaves. And this guy was, I don't know, 4 or 5 feet tall, and I moved it from the other side of the yard over here. And it's done really good. They're super easy to transplant. So these guys, I mean, I've dug them up any size, tiny ones to giant ones, and they transplant. As long as you keep them watered until they start showing improvement, you'll be fine. Beautyberry produces a lot of beautiful red magenta flowers and fruit. The flowers are really tiny, but the pollinators really rely on them a great deal. And then when the magenta fruit gets set, they last almost all through the winter, so those provide food for the birds all winter. Here's another native that survived the freeze really well. This is a native canna. The common name is bandanna-of-the-everglades. It gets beautiful yellow flowers on it. Of course, it's not in bloom right now, but I will put a slide at the end of this section so you can see how pretty the flowers are. I believe this guy goes down to 15 degrees, but it does require wet soil, wet feet. Canna lilies, or cannas, are very water hungry, so this barrel I've got it in only has a couple of very small drain holes, so it's continually moist in there, so it needs a particular site to be grown in. So unless you have a wet place so it can have wet feed, or you could grow it in a half whiskey barrel like I do. It puts out beautiful blooms as long as I feed it some liquid kelp every once in a while, maybe some fish meal. But it's really nice to have as a container grown plant. This is my eastern redbud. This did great. It didn't freeze. It's a deciduous tree, so it doesn't have any foliage on it when we had the freeze. So immediately after the freeze, it shot out blooms, and now it's putting out its leaves. So eastern redbud, that's a good one. I love the color of it. If I find these again, I'm gonna get 7 or 8 of them. They're just gorgeous when they're in bloom. The little magenta flowers are edible. You can eat them in salads, but I leave them for the pollinators. It's just such a sweet little tree. And they stay relatively short, I think maybe 15, 20 feet. This guy I grew from a seedling when we moved here 6 years ago. It was probably 2 feet in height. So it's easy to grow from seed. They're easy to transplant. Sometimes you can find them at big box stores or nurseries. I know a lot of people lost citrus trees. This is a key lime. I have 2 of them, and neither one of them got frosted or frostbite or frozen or anything. They're really tough little plants. Actually, this one, it's spurred on, like the other guys, it's spurred on flowers. So this guy's putting out tons of flowers. So if you like citrus, I would suggest definitely trying a key lime. I have a little lime somewhere there. I can't locate it down here on the right. But it gets little tiny citrus blooms that are very fragrant. And I use key lime a lot in cooking, and I like to have fresh lime juice on my fish. Scallops. It's a great plant dooryard citrus. So when it grows and you leave your limes on there, and when you're in need of one for dinner, you can just come out and get it. You don't have to go to the store. Make sure you've got it on the grocery list. So I like to keep useful plants like that. This is a Satsuma mandarin tangerine tree. So this did well through the freeze, and it's now blooming. I mean, it's covered with blooms, so the freeze didn't affect it at all. It gets such beautiful fragrant flowers. I mean, I buy a lot of tangerines, so when this is producing fruit, I really appreciate it. I can just walk out here and get a tangerine. So if you like growing citrus, I would say that would be a good candidate. My seagrape is the most disappointing of all the casualties because this thing was massive. It's way up over the roof, and it gave me this beautiful tropical privacy screen, and I don't believe it's going to come back. The large main stalks are oozing sap, and I've cut several of them, and they don't appear to have any green growth inside. Oh, sorry about that. It's not wanting to focus. But I mean, this thing's got massive. Actually, there's two plants here. It got massive. It was one of my favorite plants, but the freeze really hit it hard. So I wouldn't recommend seagrape, I don't think. I probably won't use it again. Here's another angle of my swamp dogwood. It gets beautiful clusters of white flowers, and that is making like a really awesome privacy screen along the back of my porch. So all that greenery along the porch there is swamp dogwood. And yes, there's my poor sad seagrape. If you have a natural area or a large enough place to put swamp dogwood, I definitely recommend that. This is a golden dewdrop. This is a non-native shrub, but they always have them for sale at the big box stores, so I tend to use these because I can't really get to native nurseries that much anymore. They're just too big and too hot, and they make you take a wagon around and haul your own plants, and I'm just way too, I don't know, I hate to say it, but I mean, I'm just not fit enough to do that anymore, so I tend to try to buy stuff that I can get at the big box stores. And if you've seen my video on golden dewdrop, this thing attracts a lot of butterflies. It's a really great butterfly plant, and it's a really great bumblebee plant. But this one got toasted like immediately. I don't remember what the hardiness temperature is, but I'll have it in the notes, or I'll have it in the caption. I don't think, I have 3 of them, and I don't think any of them are gonna come back from the roots. I could be wrong. I think it just destroyed them. We'll see. I'm not gonna cut any of the foliage until I see if something's coming out at the base. This tiger swallowtail is absolutely in love with the golden dewdrop. She spends all her time on these flowers. Actually, I'm not sure if it's a male or a female, but it's just so beautiful to look out here and see this giant beauty. So this is one of my coral beans, And kind of like the deciduous trees and shrubs, it made it just fine because it didn't start putting foliage out until, I don't know, a couple of weeks later. It's actually got a couple of blooms on it. So I'm happy to say the coralbean made it. And if you grow coralbean, hopefully you know this, it's always going to look like a pile of sticks in the spring because the bloom stalks come out on last year's growth before the leaves come out. So it's always going to look like a pile of sticks. Once the blooms come out, then it's going to be like fireworks. It's going to be beautiful. So this is another one that I think survived the freeze really well because it was basically dormant during the freeze. So that may be the key to finding the best natives to use. Here's another native that survived the freeze. This is a vine called Carolina jessamine. It's an evergreen and it gets beautiful yellow trumpet-shaped flowers. This one happens to be growing at the base of the tiny oak tree back there. And I've trained it to go up. And it comes out among the branches. This is what they tend to do in nature anyway. Carolina jessamine is a really easy to grow native plant. It transplants really well. You can root it from cuttings. It has beautiful evergreen foliage and of course these gorgeous flowers. The only thing is it's not a great plant for the wildlife in terms of pollinator availability because the flowers contain a poisonous alkaloid that's been known to kill honeybees. But our native bumblebees have learned to adapt to it and they consume just enough so that they don't get poisoned. It's a great addition to a native landscape because it's super easy to grow. It's zero maintenance. I like to plant it and train it along a tree trunk, and then it goes up into the top and reaches out to find the sun, so you kind of get this umbrella of beautiful yellow blooms in the spring. This one probably can be found at most big box stores. This one I actually found somewhere in the wild and transplanted it here. Well, this is one of my firebushes. This is a native plant. This is the one that gets really large, unlike the dwarf hybrid that they sell at Lowe's. So this one didn't make it. I have 3 of them, and all 3 of them got fried. A customer of mine who lives pretty far south of me in Indian River County lost all of hers as well, and I would have thought that it wouldn't have been damaged that bad that far south. So firebush, I have to say I can't give it up because it's one of my favorite plants. The hummingbirds love it, the butterflies love it. So I'm hoping it'll come back from the ground. The little stick in the center of the screen, that's my other firebush. So firebushes didn't make it, but I'm thinking maybe if I could find a nice microclimate to keep one in. Here's another one of my firebushes that didn't make it. Poor things. I mean, these were covered with blooms. They were absolutely loaded with blooms. The butterflies and hummingbirds were on them every day. This is a scarlet hibiscus. Now I don't think it was even out of the ground when we had the freeze. I think this is all new growth. So I'm not really sure how it handled the freeze. The plant next to it is a non-native porterweed, and that got toasted. I'm not sure if any of those are going to come back from the ground or not, so I'm kind of leaving them be for right now. Plus they may have caterpillar chrysalises or butterfly chrysalises on them, excuse me. So that's another thing too to think about when you're cleaning up the debris from the freeze. Some of the dead plants may have butterfly chrysalises, so kind of keep an eye out for that when you're trimming the dead stuff away. Right next to my seawall, 4 plants survived. On the left, we've got a dahoon holly. In the center, we've got a red maple. To the right of that is a wax myrtle. And in the foreground, although it's not native to Florida, this is a bottle brush. And it's actually putting out blooms. This is the dahoon holly. Sometimes the big box stores will have these, but not that often, so you may have to go to a native nursery. And my red maple, those are usually very easy to find. Volunteers in your neighbor's yard, in your yard, along the roadside, they transplant really well. Even if they're 4 or 5 feet tall, they usually survive. And this beautiful deep green thing is a wax myrtle. And wax myrtles are usually very abundant. You can usually find seedlings of these, and they transplant really well. Sorry, I drifted there. I've got some beautiful wax myrtles on the canal. I'm going to show you these. This whole backyard was nothing but grass, and the canal was nothing but grass. And I identified some wax myrtle seedlings that were coming up on the canal. Now they're about 20 feet tall, and they're loaded with wildlife. The birds are always eating fruit. So that's another really good candidate. And then up here, of course, we have the bottle bush. I know they're not native, but I'm partial to them. I love the flowers, and the hummingbirds love the flowers. But that guy didn't bat an eyelash either, and it started putting out blooms immediately. So that's a good candidate if you don't mind going non-native. Everything else got toasted. All my Spanish needle, my false nettle, all of my wildflowers, my milkweeds, they all just got fried. This is another native that survived really well. This is called a yellow anise. It has little tiny yellow flowers which produce really unusual shaped seed pods. If you ever use anise in your cooking, they look just like the anise seeds. Now, I'm not sure if these can be used in cooking or not. I haven't researched it, but this one did great in the freeze. And this one I actually purchased at Lowe's. So these are easy to find. Close up with the leaves. They get pretty large. They get to be 25, 30 feet in height, so they're really good for privacy screenings. They're really good cover for the wildlife. Here's another one that survived really well. This is called the blue flag iris. This is a native iris that gets beautiful blue flowers on it. And like most irises, except for the exception, I guess, of an African iris, most irises like wet feet. They like moist soil. So I either grow them in half whiskey barrels or try to put them near the lake or next to the canal, someplace where it has a high water table. But the only problem with that is then they start moving themselves around and they spread out and you kind of lose the foliage. So I like them in a barrel, that way when they bloom, all the blooms are right there and all the tubers stay there. So when I need some tubers for something, I can just pull a few out and divide the tubers up. This is a nice plant for beetles. Beetles really like these flowers. My coral honeysuckle made it through the freeze and it immediately started blooming. So it's done really well. I'm really pleased. So thankfully the hummingbirds have some nice flowers to nectar on. Our coral honeysuckle grows in part shade, full sun, average to moist soils. It's very easy to root, to transplant. You can grow it from seed. And if it gets out of bounds or in an area where you don't want it, you can just trim it back. It takes pruning very well. And this guy has just been left all on its own, so unfortunately, its mom doesn't get out here to take care of it too much. But it's just doing fine without me. So that's a nice candidate. This is a cultivar of the large magnolia that grows native everywhere. This is called a little gem. And this one survived the freeze without blinking an eye. So magnolia is another good candidate. If you don't have the room for the large magnolia, which is Magnolia grandiflora, Lowe's usually always has the little gems for sale, and these usually only get about 25 feet. So these are great for smaller spaces, and they tend to stay more column shaped and don't spread out as wide as Magnolia grandiflora. It's got beautiful leaves, beautiful flowers. It's a really gorgeous plant. The underside of the leaves turn a really beautiful burnt brown. It's a really great foraging place for the wildlife. Unfortunately, the squirrels tend to like the flower buds, so I don't get to keep too many flowers on mine, unfortunately, but hey, it is what it is. I plant for wildlife, so I have to expect that. But I have a couple of slides, I'll show those, and then you guys can see what the flowers and the beautiful fruit pod looks like. The fruit gets a beautiful, brilliant red color, and it's attractive in the landscape as well, but that's also very attractive to the wildlife, birds and squirrels and smaller mammals. I think occasionally possums will even eat the seeds. Here's the wax myrtle I was saying that I found growing here when we first moved in. That's across the street on the canal side of my property. And when I moved here, that was nothing but grass. And I didn't mow for about a month, and I started seeing the wax myrtles coming up. So when I say don't mow and let it grow, you'll be amazed at what you find. So these things have given me such amazing, beautiful privacy from the neighbors across the street. And it's about a 30-foot spread of wax myrtle that just came up on its own. So if you can learn to identify things, you'll be amazed at the things that you can have growing in your property and in your green space that you don't have to purchase, you don't have to plant, you don't have to maintain, you don't have to water. And in this case, they survive the freeze, so you don't have to try to clean it up afterwards. You don't have to try to protect it during the freeze. So this one not only survived really well, it started blooming, and it already has a couple of fruit on it. It's kind of windy today, so sorry for... Let me see if I can get it. There we go. And this one has big, black, beautiful fruit. They're just absolutely delicious. This is one that I grew from a cutting, so I know it's a female. The male and the females have flowers on different trees, so you definitely need to get a female if you want fruit. So this one I grew from a cutting, so I haven't put it in the ground yet. It's about 3 feet tall. It's a great wildlife plant, but the fruit are just so delicious. I usually try to steal the fruit before the birds can get them. This is another native that didn't do well. This is the native plumbago. It's also called Dr. Bush. This is a host plant for a Florida butterfly, which right now escapes me. I'll put it in the notes. So it didn't do well. It's coming back, and it's got, you can see on the bottom left, there's a flower. So parts of it got kind of crispy fried, and then parts of it didn't. So it's coming back pretty quick, but it looks terrible. I mean, it was covered with beautiful lush growth, and now it looks pretty scraggly, so I'll probably cut most of that off. This is my wild coffee. This is Psychotria nervosa. This didn't get frozen back, but it is in kind of like a little microclimate here. There's a palm tree on one side of it protecting it, and there's some privacy panels on the other. So if it were out in the open, I'm not sure if it would have survived or not. But the other ones that got frozen were short leaf wild coffee, different species. Here's another one that survived. I know I keep saying that, but hey, it's the truth. I'm so happy to have found so many in my green space that survived that onslaught. This is a coastalplain willow. This is one of our native willows. In this instance, I believe a lot of these were dormant when we had the really bad freeze. So right after the freeze, they started leafing out, and this one already started putting out blooms. And I know I keep saying this, but this one likes wet feet. I live on a lake, so I have to have a lot of plants that like wet feet. That's kind of all I've got here. And this is a host plant for the viceroy butterfly. It transplants really well. They're usually along the roadsides. If you find wet roadsides, you can usually always find this. And you can just pull up a couple of pieces. If they have roots on them, they're more than likely to grow if you bring them home. So I hope this video gives you guys some ideas on different plants you can use that are going to survive freezing weather. Because there's nothing worse than coming outside and having to deal with all of the brown foliage and, you know, losing your plants, losing your flowers. A couple of my friends lost all the flowers on their mango trees. I mean, they had 40-foot tall mango trees, and it nipped all of their flowers in the bud, literally. So things like that can be like really heartbreaking for people because they plan on having that food all year. So as I do with my native plants, I also do that with fruit trees. I try to make sure that they can tolerate freezing temperatures. So I don't know, just when you're buying plants, I guess that's one thing to keep in mind. You don't really think about it until you live through the freeze. And then you realize, hey, maybe I better start thinking about the hardiness temperature of these plants. I'm going to put the hardiness and the zones for each one of the plants I'm showing. And at the end, I'll have the information with the common name. I always do the common name and the Latin name. So hopefully this will give you a guide to help you pick out some plants that will survive the next freeze we get, which hopefully won't be until next year. This is a tropical sage, also called a red salvia. And most of these got frozen back to the ground, but several have come up like very quickly and put out blooms already, so I'm not sure what that's about, but there's only two. This one is super tall. It's going up through my chain link fence. Here's another one by my front door that's coming up. I think that has a couple of flower blooms on it. So the red salvias didn't do that well, but they're coming back really quickly. So I'm glad they rebounded so fast. Here's another red salvia that somehow did not get frozen. I think I found a total of 3. Here's another one that survived the freeze really well. This is lyreleaf sage. If you watched my video about lyreleaf sage, you'll recognize this little spot of plants. The lyreleaf sage is a nice one to have. Great pollinator plant. It's beautiful blue flowers. The elderberry did great. I'm really pleased with that. I thought for sure it was going to freeze because this is on the lakeside and it got really, really cold over here. But the elderberry did well and it came through with flying colors. So if you have a moist spot, elderberry is a good candidate for that. It's a great wildlife plant. Super easy to root, super easy to transplant. It's difficult to grow from seed, but if you get cuttings, you can just stick them in a cup of water and within a few days they start rooting. And it's a multi-trunk shrub. So I'm happy to report that survived. And then of course my beautiful immature cabbage palm next to it survived as well. So if you have space for a cabbage palm, I always recommend those. They're gorgeous palms. They're native. They can be difficult to find at local big box stores. So you may have to go to a native nursery for that one, but they get big, beautiful clumps of flowers on them for the pollinators, and then they get berries after they get pollinated, and the berries provide food for all the wildlife. So my little native island of plants did really well, except for the wild coffee. The wild coffee just turned to toast, so I'm hoping it will come back from the roots. Many people aren't fond of smilax vines, but this one is called bamboo vine. It is a smilax, but it doesn't have the amount of thorns that the other ones do. And it produces little clusters of green flowers that the pollinators enjoy, and then it gets fruit on it, and it's really good habitat for the animals. It's nice foraging area. It's a nice hiding place for them to stay safe from predators. This is a climbing aster. This one survived really well. Sorry to have to say it, but yes, it likes wet feet. They can grow in drier conditions if you keep them watered, regularly. But I tend to put the plant in the right place because I can't usually get to a lot of the landscaping shores like most people. So this is planted right next to the lake. It's getting a lot of new foliage, and hopefully it's going to be putting out flowers pretty soon. This gets big, beautiful, purplish pink flowers. They're very fragrant, and the pollinators love them. Butterflies love it, the bees love it, the beetles. I mean, this thing attracts every pollinator. This beautiful aster is called a climbing aster. Its Latin name is Symphyotrichum carolinianum. The Elliot's aster made it through the freeze. I didn't get out here to cut off last year's flower stalks, so it looks a little untidy, but so Elliot's aster is another good candidate if you have a moist, wet site. Of course, I'm on the lake, and a lot of people don't have that type of environment. We could always grow it in containers. I'll show a couple of slides of the flowers. It attracts tons of pollinators. Beautiful purple flowers. They're really fragrant. It's a really nice plant to have, but it does spread by runners, so it can be pretty aggressive, so it needs to have its own space. And this one I keep in the middle of the lawn like an island, and I mow around it to keep it from spreading. This is a blue porterweed. This is the non-native one that's sold at the big box stores. Kind of like the golden dewdrop. I usually buy these because they're available at Lowe's and Walmart. And it's a really good pollinator plant. The butterflies really like this plant. So I really always like to have this one growing because it's a kind of like my go-to, because like I said, they have them at the big box stores, so it's easy for me to get them. But unfortunately, it doesn't tolerate freezes for an extended period of time, so I'm not sure if these are going to survive. I've trimmed a couple back, probably like a couple of feet, and I haven't seen any green inside the stems, so I think they may have died. That was a rough freeze for everybody. My spiderwort did really well. It didn't freeze. It's actually blooming already. That's a really nice one for the bees because it has beautiful blue flowers, and the bees love this plant. It's super easy to transplant, super easy to start from seed. You can grow it in containers like I'm doing here. It's probably best in like a natural setting if you put it in the yard because it spreads by runners, so it can kind of take over a flower bed. So I wouldn't put it with smaller plants that it would outcompete because those will end up dying back. But spiderwort's a nice little native. It's actually called Ohio spiderwort. I think I have seen these at Lowe's and Walmart, so you might be able to find them locally and get some instant gratification. Wow, the more I walk around the yard, the more I realize there's a lot of things that I didn't lose. I have tons of wild violets coming up everywhere. Those didn't get frozen, and they're all producing flowers. Somehow I ended up with the white variety. It started out purple, and now it's white. I don't know if it's because of the soil pH or what it is, but I have quite a few of them. They're all throughout the property. and those transplant really well. So when I see them in a path where I constantly crush them, I'll dig them up and put them in a flower pot or put them in a flower bed. So that's a nice easy native plant. I mean, I don't know. You guys know that I'm about easy native plants. So if I grow it, it's got to be able to survive negligence, because I'm too sick most of the time to come out here and work. So I just love the natives because they always provide for me. Well, for those of you that lost some precious plants, I'm sorry about that, and I hope you will get some ideas from my video, maybe change out some of those plants for things that will survive without you taking so much care of them and then being disappointed in the end anyway. See you next time. Until then, enjoy your green space.